Socialist, educationist and lifelong activist Neville Alexander passed away last week, but his humility and humanity will always be remembered by us. A public memorial service was held this past Saturday at Belgravia High School, paying tribute to a great South African and son of Cape Town. We spent some time with friend and comrade Dr. Sophia Kisting and Elizabeth Philander Heyden in conversation with Neville's ideas and legacy.
And his great love for that family.
Why does racism still exist in South African workplaces after 17 years of so-called democracy?
I think one should actually ask an even broader question. Why does racism exist in post-apartheid South Africa? Pure and simple. And the answer is very straightforward, that the fundamental economic relations have not changed, or rather have not changed very fundamentally, with the result that the same structures of colonialism and apartheid, which constructed the racial division of the working class, those same structures continue to exist today, and they have exactly the same kinds of effects. So when we talk about racism in the workplace, we're talking about racism across the entire society.
To use Neville's words, he said that I grew up putting other people first. And so it was very easy for me to become a socialist, because for him socialism was really about equality, about all people being the same, about all people having the basics of life, and also very, very much about economic justice, that there need to be much greater sharing of the wealth of the country and of the land, and that people should participate in that. So yes, I think he was very, very much a socialist, but it's important for us just to say what kind of socialist that he was.
I think we as communities have a lot to do, especially in education. We've got to encourage, and NUMSA and other groups have to learn this, we've got to encourage our people to learn one another's languages so that we can break the barrier, the language barrier, the cultural barrier that separates us and which is exploited by those in power.
And we speak about ourselves as Indian, as colored, as African, and as white. Still, we think, even if we don't want to, if you want to apply for a post, you have this section there that says racial classification. Still, Neville would never fill that in as colored African or that. He would simply probably say racial or not applicable.
If you look at what's going on in South Africa today, I think you realize, most of us realize, that a lot of the dreams that people had in 1994 have turned to ash. I mean, that's putting it bluntly. A lot of us realize that. Many of us, of course, predicted this. We knew that some of this was going to happen, but none of us could think that it would be as bad as certain aspects of it have become.
I think Neville was not always serious, you know. I remember how he laughed. He had a very infectious laugh. And in spite of the fact that he might have had all these academic achievements and so on, he was a very humble person. He was so completely honest that, and you realize this, his actions were no different from his words. And so that's something that I really admired about him.
Some of the things that I cannot help but remember is, as Betty said, that he was a very ordinary South African, very ordinary person, but that he did have an extraordinary life because he touched so many. But he would also just come and say, "Oh, I laughed like hell. You know, I laughed like hell at this or that." And he loved dancing, you know, and a good poem, and so he was a very ordinary South African who was gifted with a very great intellect, which he used for the betterment of his people.
We've got to make people once again realize that they have the power. Power is not simply the control of armed force, whether it's legitimate or not. That is not only the only source of power. Power is everywhere, but you got to identify it. You got to know where the power is. If you form a community reading club or you start a creche in your community, if you organize your neighborhood, you are creating a center of power. Another world is possible, but it's not going to come by itself. We've got to build it. We've got to build it today. And